Welcome to GNCC Espresso Live. My name is Mishka Balsom, and I will be your moderator for the next hour. The purpose of this series is to better understand how COVID-19 has impacted our lives so far, and to start thinking about tomorrow. How will this pandemic change how we live, how we work, how our municipalities will function? How has it impacted our corporate partnerships, supply chains, and international affairs? How will it reshape our collective values, priorities across Niagara? It is critical for us to convene for conversations that encourage us to stretch our minds while determining how to best move forward. The decisions that we are going to make in the weeks and months to come will be the foundation of our economic recovery. We are encouraged by the respect that has been shown not only among different political leaders and parties, but also in the public-private partnerships that have been formed in the joint commitment to support the slowdown of the virus. In addition, businesses have been able to adapt their operational model to online and alternate methods of delivering services and goods. Their creativity and resourcefulness are remarkable, and not to mention the generosity and support of those most vulnerable in our region. Businesses have been loud in the asks from all levels of government regarding subsidies and provisions to rules and regulations. And the government is responding at a speed never seen before, as businesses are eagerly awaiting the conditions to change so that they can sustainably resume operations. To provide us with insight on the impact of COVID-19 on municipalities across Niagara, we have been hosting multiple webinars with municipal leaders giving us a look at their own community. And it is my great pleasure to welcome two distinguished municipal leaders this morning, Mayor Sandra Easton with the Town of Lincoln and Mayor Frank Campion with the City of Welland. Mayor Easton, Mayor Campion, thank you for joining us. Before we get started, thank you to all attendees for being with us this morning. We truly encourage a dialogue and interaction. So if you have a question, there are two options for you. You will see on the right-hand side of your screen the symbol of a hand. By clicking that, we know that you want to ask a question and we will unmute you. Please just watch for it. And the second option is called a chat box. It's a field where you can type in the question. We can see it, the panelists can see it, and we'll do our best to get to it. And lastly, we have received a number of questions via social media and email, and we're going to start out with just one of them. So let's jump into it. When we look back on the past 8 weeks, all of our worlds have changed. Thousands of businesses temporarily closed their doors, drastically reduced staff, redefined their complete business model, all in an effort to stabilize their organization, their cash flow during these COVID-19 times. Every organization had to look at their own operational model and make adjustments. And municipalities are no different. Municipalities of all sizes are taking extraordinary measures to support residents, including our most vulnerable ones, through this unprecedented public health and economic challenge. And Mayor Easton, if I could start out with you, how has COVID-19 impacted Lincoln over the past few weeks? What are some of the measures that you had to put in place? Mayor Easton?
Well, let me thank you very much, Mishka. It's a real pleasure to take part in today's session with Mayor Campion. And I want to just say to everyone, happy Economic Development Week. It couldn't be coming along at a more opportune time. And there are some pretty exciting things happening all over the region. I would say in answer to your question that you don't wait for the event to happen to be able to respond. And I think that I believe that that is really one of the strengths that we have in Lincoln. Preparing for every situation has always been part of the strategic plan network over a number of decades in the town. It's very interesting because in this last go around with the strategic plans, we actually we moved things up considerably, and we moved away from work lists, creating work lists, and started to talk about trends. And although we didn't talk about a pandemic as a trend, we certainly did talk about an economic recession. And so, and here we are. we are in a very, very strong financial position. I say that with considerable confidence and from every perspective in terms of financial sustainability. And we're going to continue to work through decisions based on that and as circumstances arise. We continue, of course, to offer essential services. We do have reduced staff. We deferred the hiring of 71 students who would have started last week and who are so important to the summer programming. But overall, the first decision was to create our emergency operations team. Who have been managing the day-to-day. We moved ahead with delegations of authority and the creation of a team. We've never had an executive team in terms of the council because we believed that everyone should be involved to the greatest extent possible. But we did need to have a plan if one of us got sick. And so the deputy mayor, of course, would have been the natural person if I was the one that would be unfortunate enough. But we decided to stretch that out a bit. And so we went to the next person who would be the deputy mayor. And we've been working as a small caucus with the CAO and with members of the senior management team. So having done that and just kind of getting our house in order, that happened pretty quickly. We then announced to the public deferrals with the taxes and also the way we were going to handle penalties to give them some relief, because we believed that the most important thing was to ease their minds. And I would say that that's probably the first steps that we took.
Very much, Mayor Easton. I think if anything would help is the easing of minds at this time is probably one of the top priorities with all decisions that governments are making and other organizations are making. Mayor Campion, what have the last 8 weeks looked like for the city of Welland?
Thanks again for putting this on. Really appreciate the opportunity to speak through you folks to the business community. I won't repeat what Mayor Easton has said. We're doing very much the same thing. And I can tell you that the mayors across Niagara are working very collaboratively and close together. So you're going to hear a lot of the same answers, I think, based on the fact that we do collaborate and we do talk and we do best practices. Maybe a couple of things I could add to that, what it looks like here at City Hall. We continue to be busy, and so we have the same issues. We want to make sure, our bylaws are busy because we're ensuring that people are doing their social distancing and not, gathering in parks and things like that. So that's something a little bit different, where we're enforcing provincial directives, essentially provincial orders, which is something a bit new for our folks here, working collaboratively with the police on those things. And that's part of when we're talking about calming measures, I think those are important because people tend to, if they see people who are not, staying apart or who are gathering, it really creates a bit of anxiety in people. So I think it's important that we are proactive in making sure that we address any issues that come up that way. We continue also to support business through this, through the deferrals that Mayor Easton has said, but also we continue to work. We're accepting planning applications. We're processing planning applications. We're processing building permits, getting right up to the point of being ready to issue them as soon as the restrictions are lifted. Our building inspectors continue to inspect construction that's ongoing, that's permitted under the rules here. We're installing water meters. So we're trying to keep business as normal as possible while still recognizing the restrictions and orders from upper levels of government. And I think that helps the business community, maybe reducing a little bit of anxiety in certain sectors where they know that we're here working for them, and that when we come out of this, we should have boxes of building permits ready to push out the door and they can get started. And I'm looking at that as probably one of the earlier things that might happen, because it's an industry that puts a lot of money back into the economy through employment, but also, the supply chain purchases and that sort of thing. And we did have a meeting with those folks, just virtually, just like we are here, just some different sectors of the business community. And in the construction side, there are going to be some restrictions. So I think everything's going to happen as we roll this out or trickle out, whatever, however it's going to come out, it's going to come with a lot of strings attached. And so we're spending a lot of time trying to figure out what those strings are so that we can deal with them. So in addition to what Sandra said as well.
Yeah. We believe the same, we hear the same, that the construction industry is probably one of the first ones to be able to move forward, which is always something that is of great benefit to all municipalities. But both of you have mentioned a few things. You mentioned deferral of taxes or utilities, other fees that you're faced with. You will be faced with the lack of maybe transit revenue coming in or parking revenue that you could have. Cancellation of events will have impacted you. Yet municipalities legally don't have the ability to run an operating deficit. And so some people are saying that that really shows that this crisis exposes the cracks in an outdated governance model that is fundamentally misaligned with the modern reality of running a local government. It makes it difficult more often than not. Revenues are plummeting, unanticipated costs are rising, and with very few fiscal tools available to you, local leaders like yourselves are facing some really stark choices. What are the answers to some of those questions? And Mayor Campion, if you want to take this question before passing
Sure.
on to Mayor Easton.
Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, it's a problem. And, you know, we're the closest level of government to the people with the least ability to deal with a lot of issues. So, you know, a lot of what we do is dictated as far as what we're able to do and what we're not able to do, which makes it, as I say, very difficult. So what we're looking at now is, you're correct, we're seeing a shortfall. We're projecting just for the first little while that was going to be around $4.5 million, which is going to set us back. That's going to escalate as time goes on, and it'll be more. So really, we've gone into a really heavy duty mode of mitigating the costs. And so through the measures that we've taken, we've been able to reduce that $4.5 million down to about a $500,000. So we're trying to make this as manageable as possible through every means that we have, while still being able to provide the services that are required. And unfortunately, that does include things like layoffs. It includes having people working from home. So difficult choices are being made. But at the end of the day, even if we're given the ability to run a deficit, I don't know that that's a good business practice to sort of ramp that up, because somehow it's going to have to get paid at some point anyway. So I think the more we can mitigate early on, the better position will be when we get out of the other side, because the last thing that people are going to want to see next year is a very large increase in municipal property taxes and water and sewer rates because of the fact that we weren't mitigating. Obviously, we were looking at upper levels of government to try to, you know, get them to fund, and there's a lot of talk about it, and hopefully that happens. But again, there's only one taxpayer, and so you're going to pay it here, you're going to pay it there. So I think it's our big move right now is to just try to save as much money as we can and not ramp up a whole bunch of debt that we'll have to pay off later on and through tax increases.
Yeah. And we truly can say that I think every resident of Welland is greatly appreciative. Those are very difficult choices when you look at every line item of your budget and saying, how can we make a difference there? And the truth is that a lot of businesses are faced with very similar situations now too. The government has offered subsidies, resources, and others, but in many cases, they're deferrals. So the question is, August is going to come and they have to pay for it, or they have to pay it back. And are they able to do it? Those are very difficult choices in difficult times, and I really appreciate your honesty in that. Mayor Easton? On the same
yes, I absolutely. I certainly, the mitigation measures are extremely important, and being in a good strong financial position certainly should give us a great deal of comfort. But at the same time, it doesn't mean that we should spend money on anything that isn't absolutely essential. And we need to continue to build up those our coffers in order to respond, at least in the short term, and possibly in some cases the longer term, for people that are not able to pay, so that we can be comfortable to give them some ease in their ability to come forward either partially or completely in their own payments. And so the idea of a deficit, I don't think, is really one that we would be looking at as any kind of a solution. Eventually, you have to deal with it. And so debt is always a major, major question. It's really it's really a matter of maintaining control right now, and not using anything that you don't need. However, we must be able to get out of the gate in a hurry. And so we continue to provide every service that we can and to plan for every eventuality, which includes having shovel-ready projects. And when you look at our capital budget, a very small percentage, very, very small amount, I think it's about $60,000 on 3 million projects, $3 million in projects, that number is not correct. The number is very, very small. However, we do need to move forward in order to get things done that's going to keep people occupied. It's going to get the workforce into the position that it needs to be.
Yeah, and I really appreciate it. This is actually, this question has come in. It was emailed to us actually last night, and I think it's very timely to ask it at this point, because we're talking about, and Mayor Easton, you brought up the sense of where do we invest, how do we move forward when many of the restrictions are being lifted. And the question is, in an effort to ignite economies during a downturn, federal and provincial governments have often focused on infrastructure investments at a local level. In Niagara, or in your respective communities actually across Canada, we have an ever-growing infrastructure backlog. What would be your priority for your community? And is affordable housing one of the priorities that is there? Mayor Easton, what are your priorities when you look at that and saying to be shovel ready for when the governments are ready to invest and move forward? What are some of the projects that are important to the town of Lincoln?
Well, Mishka, we always have we have the full scope of services. Of course, affordable housing is really top of mind for everyone now. And you know, it is a little bit of a disappointment that the momentum that has been building in Niagara may be slowed down somewhat, because I really believe that the intentions are very forward moving in every municipality around this matter. And we're starting to learn a great deal more about the value of housing and how it impacts the whole social structure and the social economy of a community. So I would say that affordable housing is very, very, very high on that list, but we can't not recognize that water, wastewater, all of our facilities, all of our assets have to be maintained, and they have to be kept in good repair. And so I wouldn't put one over another, but they are all very, very important, and they're all reflected in our capital plan, and including issues around the lakefront and the loss of and erosion of the lakefront, where there are substantial capital projects that that have to be done. But we continue to issue tenders. The pricing has been quite favorable, sometimes 15 to 25% improvement over what we would have been looking for last year, and so that is good for the municipality. And so we know we can get the workers out there and get the jobs done for the municipality at the same time. Thank you.
That is good to hear, actually, that the tenders are coming in lower than expected, allowing you to probably do more and stretch your budget further. Mayor Campion, what are some of the things that if the federal and provincial governments are investing in infrastructure, that would be a priority for Welland?
Yeah, I don't have much different to say than Mayor Easton, but I guess it's easiest to make a connection that, you know, kind of hard service, underground infrastructure, roads, sewers, sewer separations. All of those things are required in order to provide housing and affordable housing. So you can't really do one without the other. You need to have the foundation for these things to happen. So affordable housing is top of mind, as you say, for everybody around here. It's an interesting concept in the sense that affordable housing, in my mind, is a very relevant or relative, term. So in relationship to what? And so when we're talking about affordable housing, if you go from region to region, city to city, those numbers are different. So where we have in Niagara, very affordable housing if you're coming out of the GTA, but we don't have affordable housing for people in our own market. And so we need to do some of those things to promote that through bylaw, through our different planning strategies, et cetera. So that's a big part of it. We also, as Sandra says, we have to look at the bigger picture. We need to continue with infrastructure programs. Again, they create jobs, but they also improve the quality of life within our municipality. So I think all of those projects are on the table, and I know we're working hard, and I know Mayor Easton is as well, that we do need the government to roll those grant funds out. We need them to increase the gas taxes, provide that type of money to us so that we can incentivize our projects and make sure that we can afford to do what we need to do down here.
Yeah, actually, thank you very much. But while we're on the topic of housing, I was wondering about one thing. Some people are suggesting that people are realizing right now that I don't need to live close to where I work. And so you look at people in Toronto who might actually say, I would prefer living in a single detached house or townhouse, maybe over living in a condo or apartment building. I can work remotely. I've shown and proven over the last couple of months that that's very doable. And employers might even like the idea of needing less commercial space for all of their employees. So there might be some benefits. So some people in Niagara believe that this could mean another influx of people from the GTA into Niagara. Both of you, do you see it the same way? Is that an opportunity for Niagara? Is that a concern for Niagans who are living here? What is your take on it? Mayor Campion, if you want to take it first.
Sure, yeah. So, working remotely has been a part of what's happening in Welland, the Welland market, certainly, and probably for the rest of Niagara. We do have people moving here from the GTA, from Toronto, who are working remotely. They've got to go to the office maybe once or twice a week or less. Two of my three children have the ability to work remotely from their homes. One son working really essentially based in Toronto, but working out of Montreal. So you can see that there's a lot of flexibility in that market, and it's going to become more and more important. And I really, if I wanted to be a visionary, which I sometimes am, but not very accurate most of the time. But if you look at Toronto Center, the downtown Toronto, there's an awful lot of office space there that could be converted to housing if you don't need all of those offices. And so I think the remote working is going to be more and more a part of everyday life, and certainly it's a great thing for Niagara as people move down here, and we welcome that. You're not defined by where you work exclusively. You're defined by where you live and where you work and how you work. So I think there's a whole culture out there that's going to be a great mix within Niagara and within Welland.
Yeah, I foresee the change too, that there is a shift from an employer's point of view and from an employee's point of view too. And I think it's a welcome shift too. Mayor Easton, what is your take on this topic?
I think this is probably one of the most exciting areas that we can spend time on, because the affordability piece is very important. But as Mayor Campion says, it's all relative to who you are and whether or not you happen to be one of those people that just sold a very, very expensive house in Toronto and you want to come to Niagara. But the opportunity that I see is the realization, and I hope we will have this realization, that we talk a lot about the theoretical framework around complete communities. What better opportunity are we going to have to completely plan our communities and not be fighting with ourselves about the fact that we should have wider sidewalks and we should have cycling paths and we should have all of these things that make our communities important. You know, one of the most important indicators that I use as a mayor are the early development child indicators that come out of public health. And yet, when you start looking at where the problems are and the worries are in your community in order for children to receive all that they need to be fully participating adults, the first thing that you notice is that you don't have a nice big park where those children live. And if you do have a park, maybe it doesn't have the amenities that it ought to have for them to really enjoy themselves so that they don't have to be traveling too far. And so I don't think, I think in the past we've struggled with these decisions and how much money we're going to invest in them. And that has got to change. If people are going to be working in the community, they're going to be out in the community. And I really believe it's going to change the space that we live in. And it's all going to be extremely positive in my mind.
And they have, I couldn't agree more. And there have been some amazing studies being done on complete communities and the factors that need to be considered in building that. And maybe this crisis that we're faced with gives us the opportunity actually to stop for a second and to realign some of our resources to create exactly those communities and take advantage, as Mayor Campion has said, of possibly having an influx of people who would actually and want to make it their future home here in Niagara. But on that note of infrastructure and other elements of it, more businesses are now conducting, and if these people are coming to Niagara and people within Niagara are now conducting operations from their home and are therefore more reliant on broadband internet access. Is there a concern in your community? Does your municipality meet the demands of businesses, or is this one of those areas that we still need further significant support? Mayor Easton, can your businesses in Lincoln rely on the broadband that is being offered to them?
Well, we certainly, you know, as Mayor Campion was referring to, we have been meeting with the sectors in this format on these platforms, and I must say, very, very successful, because we've met with the craft wineries, we've met with the housing sector, the Niagara Home Builders Association, we've met with the Tender Fruit and Greenhouse, and we'll continue to do that. And today, we just launched something called Shop Lincoln, shoplincoln.ca. And it's an economic development mechanism whereby services and businesses can come together. It's really an integration of planning and economic development along with bylaw, because right now bylaw plays such an important and positive role in reminding us where we need to be in relation to the next person out on the street. But this is really set up in order to bring all of these elements together and to ensure that businesses know that the town is there to support them. And we are doing that in every way that we can. Most of it is attitude, really. It's about having a how-to attitude as opposed to know, being prepared to expand the scope of what we are doing with businesses, determining what it is that they need. Do they need help with technology? We will provide them with that. Do they need support to determine how to interpret some of these wonderful initiatives that are coming out from the province and the feds? We are there to provide them with that. We have staff that are just looking after members of the community, people who are socially isolated. That is part of our business, Mishka. And if those people are not healthy mentally, then they're not going to be able to go out and use businesses or access businesses. So we're going to continue to operate this way post-pandemic because this is one of the important learnings. How do you engage and how do you maintain the engagement throughout? That has always been the major challenge for municipalities.
Yeah, and I really want to congratulate you on your Shop Local initiative. I think this is something that we have seen coming up across Niagara, that people are more conscious of the impact that we as consumers make when we support local. But more than shopping, it goes in how do we support our overall community, those that are most vulnerable, those ones who are isolated and who can make a difference. And I think the leadership that a municipality can show, like your municipality can show, it leaves a sense for people of wanting to be part of that community. It's very inviting. Mayor Campion, on the same question of broadband internet access.
Yeah, so broadband is a requirement now. So I look at this as just part of our infrastructure within our municipality and within Niagara region. We do have several businesses and industries that require these services, and some of them are somewhat remote areas, but we haven't had any problems yet. My biggest concern with broadband is a redundancy. There are a lot of folks out there, businesses, call centers, a lot of other types of business require redundancy so that they don't get shut down. You know, if the service goes down, what's their backup plan? And so, again, we haven't had any problems with that at the moment, but it's always kind of a question that comes up when we're talking to people. I think we've got what we need, but as this grows, we have to, again, just keep our eye on the infrastructure, and do we have enough capacity and enough reach with it? So it's on our radar, definitely, but at this point, I think we're okay.
Yeah, and I think it's what we have heard from across Niagara, it's not as consistent from one community to another. So you look at some rural areas of it where it's significantly more challenging for them to conduct business there than it might be in your town or in your city at this point. So it is something that is of interest to us across Niagara. One of our attendees, Colleen, has asked a question. Businesses are asking for a generic guideline for reopening. Is any level of government working on this? Mayor Campion, if I can ask you maybe first,
Yes.
Is there anything like this? We are being asked the same question too, in many ways, but what have you heard? What have you seen?
Well, you know, it's there's nothing concrete at this point because it's very, as you know, I hate to keep using the term fluid, but it is very fluid right now as things roll out with not a lot of detail. So we here in town are gathering all the information. We've you know, put it together on our website. So it's not a concise guide, but it gives you all of the information that is known today, and we continue to monitor that. And through our planning and also our economic development, we provide that support. So if somebody needs an interpretation of something, we can provide them with the interpretation. Is this an essential construction site? Yes, it is, because it's got a medical facility in it. So we need to, you know, keep putting all this material together. I'm guessing that almost every level of government will be providing a guide. And I think the key element will be interpreting the guide so it's very relevant to specific issues within your own community. You know, we are doing a lot of different things. We're, you know, getting into more manufacturing and things like that. So how does that apply? And then how can we bundle it with other packages that are already out there? You know, we're looking at CIP grants, and we're going to be looking at how this is going to get rolled out. So the answer to the question is it's in the works, right? And it will probably be in the works for months and months ahead, because as I said, I think there are going to be a whole bunch of strings attached, and it's those strings that are going to be critical to the success of businesses in being able to be compliant and be able to open, but also to make sure that it can be explained in the sense that it's safe. So the employees are safe because they're following through with all these strings that are attached, and the community or residents who want to go to those businesses feel comfortable in going in. I think that's going to be one of the biggest challenges. So I've gotten off topic on that, but I think that guide is going to be dependent on a whole bunch of other influences coming through.
And I think it's going to be so industry specific too, and sector specific in many areas as well. Mayor Easton, are you hearing of any level of government preparing generic guidelines for businesses to reopen again?
First of all, let me say that I'm sorry that I misunderstood your previous question about broadband. I didn't hear that part of it, but I just wanted you to know I hadn't fallen asleep, but I'm sorry about that. Well, you know, this is, sure, there are guidelines out there, I suppose, but as Mayor Campion says, you know, they're very, very general. And of course, that's what you would want, because incrementalism is something that is going to, our comfort level with incrementalism is going to be the most important skill that we can apply here. We have emergency rapid response team. We now have the emergency rapid recovery team. And internally and externally, we will apply those principles. What is the guideline from the province or the feds? What does it mean in our community? How can we apply it? How are your personal circumstances structured and organized, and how do we as a town respond to you as the individual? All of these things are going to be important, and absolutely, these will go on for a long time. We may never stop doing this. This may be the way that business is conducted in the future, because we're going to have to be so quick on our feet. I mean, really, we had a council meeting last night, and I'm reading the reports, and there were several areas where I would have just immediately said, well, we've moved on from that. We've moved on from this. And so our circumstances are changing so quickly, we're going to have to be more nimble than ever before.
I fully agree. Mayor Easton, while you have the microphone, agribusiness is a critical sector of the town of Lincoln's economy, a sector reliant on foreign temporary workers and an extensive supply chain. How has agribusiness been impacted, and what further support is required for that sector?
You would think that the answer would be, it's been life-altering. It's terrible. We'll never recover from it. And those were words that I expected to hear when we were having our sector meetings. But I didn't hear that. I heard that things are very tense.
Mm-hmm.
Things aren't quite moving as smoothly as we would like them to, and there's been a great delay with our foreign workers coming in. However, the innovation and the hope is something that I don't think I was expecting it to the extent that that we've heard it and now we're seeing it. And I'll just give you a very simple example. You know, it's very labor intensive to trim trees, but if you prune trees badly, then it affects not only this year's crop, but next year and maybe even the next year. And yet the farmers that have tree fruit have determined that if you hedge the trees, if you cut the trees down across the top, and you force the branches down a bit, if you will, it means that you don't have to get up into those big trees with ladders, and it actually takes fewer people to do the work. These are some of the simple things. They seem so simple, but if you don't know what you're doing, you're not even going to think of these things. So I would say that everyone is struggling, whether they're the stores, whether the wineries, whether they're greenhouse growers. I mean, the spring season for greenhouse has been disastrous, but there's also been a lot of very positive things from a community perspective that have come out of that. And so we're doing everything we can to keep their markets open. The distilleries and breweries, there's farms there. We're not going to be having farm markets here, but farm stands will continue, and those services will be available. But people are being more resilient and more innovative than I think we've ever seen them. And I think the crops are going to be good this year. Things are a little early. We haven't had a whole lot of rain like we did last year. And so I think that we just are going to continue working very strongly together and making sure that those markets are open. The border, of course, is important. Not because we want non-essential services, but we want goods and services moving back and forth, and that's what we need with our farmers. And they're telling us that the local store chains are going to be taking everything we can through Vineland growers. They told us that that the stores are going to be taking everything that they can provide them. So I think that's very good news.
I think there's some great news, and you spoke to some of the innovation, the creativity that actually comes forward in times when we can't rely on our past supply chain and consumer chain, and we have to look at alternatives. I've been very encouraged by the greenhouses, especially the number of greenhouses who've actually now gone directly to the end consumer, have gone online to order it, have pickup options that are available. It's been extraordinary to see, and it's interesting to see how the agricultural sector, like how you can conduct some practices differently, maybe because you have less people, and still get can carry it for a year or two without impacting a harvest that we have. Mayor Campion, Mayor Easton brought up the interesting point, and that is the supply chain and the reliance of our cross-border commercial trade that we have, especially with the United States. We're seeing signs that the virus may be slowing down. Maybe now we can turn our attention a little bit to what is next. The reopening of the border has significant impact, and in the city of Welland, you have attracted a significant amount of investment. How reliant are some of those investments in the business in Welland of having a more open border and more flow, a steadier and supply chain that is not as much in shock as it is right now?
Well, first of all, thanks for not asking me about trimming trees or anything, because I don't know anything about that. But I did learn something. Thanks, Sandra. Yeah, so a lot of the industry in Welland does rely on cross-border transportation. You know, some of the facilities have, you know, owned in Canada, owned in the States, but have brother, sister companies across the border. So a lot of the product coming out of, industrial product coming out of Welland crosses the border at least once and sometimes 3 or 4 times, depending on what that product looks like. I guess, fortunately, most of those larger industries that do that are deemed to be essential services because they're making either, you know, necessary parts or in the energy sector and things like that. So that is crossing the border now, and I think it's being done so in a very responsible way. And so the borders have to open up at some point more and more. You know, places like Niagara Falls really are going to be needing that. Fort Erie, you know, but I think both mayors of those municipalities, not put words in their mouth, but you know, as much as it means to them economically, they also want to make sure that it's safe and done in a responsible way. So that's going to be the tricky part. Again, it's going to be, I think, a trickle approach again, where we're not going to just all of a sudden tomorrow the light switch goes off and everybody's crossing the border all at once. So it is important. It's very important for product to get back and forth, foods, like as Sandra said, and industrial products going back and forth. I'm interested to see how that's going to roll out. It's because the tricky part again is it's a cooperative effort. So it's, you know, Canada can't open and the US doesn't, vice versa. And so it'll be very interesting to see how our federal leaders on both sides of the border negotiate and figure that out.
Yeah. And I think our supply chain is critically important to the United States, but it is worldwide. And I think we're going to be in that situation that we're not all recovering from the pandemic in the same way. As we can already see the difference between Canada and the United States, and this will have a tremendous impact on what our cross-border situation will look like in our supply chain. We talked a little bit about facilities that are going to open up down the road and changes that are happening. But one of the questions that has been emailed to us has to do actually with a project that really engaged every municipality in Niagara, and that has to do with the Canada Summer Games, next year's Canada Summer Games. How do you think COVID-19 will impact those games next year? And questions have come forward. Will they take place? Are we ready for it? What are your thoughts, your most optimistic thoughts or realistic ones? Mayor Campion, do you want to start out with this one?
That's a wide open question. You know, so yeah, we have a flat water center here in Welland, which was going to host, I think, 3 or 4 different events there in 2021. And I'm not sure how that's going to affect. I know that the construction project near Brock has been delayed. It was already delayed prior to it being delayed again. So will the facilities be ready? I really don't know. Will the pandemic be over by then? Hopefully. That won't be the issue, that we'll have that under control, but you never know. So I think it's going to be more reliant on, are we ready? I can tell you in Welland, we're ready. All of our facilities that will be part of those games, they could have the games tomorrow because they're legacy projects that we've had for quite some time. So that's not going to be a problem. I'm more concerned about, the Brock development. And is that going to be ready? Can you have the games without it? Is it going to be 2021 games or 2022 games? I have no idea. Optimistically, I think it's going to happen in 2021, and hopefully they'll ramp up the construction on all of the necessary facilities to a degree that they're workable and functional. And so that's my optimistic approach, is that, and I'm going to be pessimistic is 2022, but I'm hoping for 2021.
Yeah, makes sense. Mayor Easton, what is your take on the games? Will they take place?
Will take place, and we'll see when they will take place. But they're not going to look like they would have looked a year ago, or even the earlier part of this year. I think there will be programmatic changes, just in terms of how you participate in the games. Maybe the games will be more, that there will be more of a reorganization, more of a consolidation of programs. It's hard to say. I think there have been some minor changes made in that regard. And I think it will also depend on whether or not we have a vaccine at that time. That will have an impact, and it will be still, I think it'll continue to be public health driven in the sense of how, crowds will be allowed to come together or not. All of these things, the social element of it will probably be quite different than anything that we anticipated. There was originally planned a very large central event in each of the municipalities. We are linked with other provinces, and of course we were all going to be out there with our best foot and face forward. Who knows what we'll be able to do now, and will people be able to travel? I think we should remain very positive about this, because sports events, festivals, games of any kind have the ability to really raise the consciousness of communities and to make them feel tremendously positive about the world they live in. So we should hope for the best and do all we can to make this a successful games.
And yes, we might be looking at, as both of you had said, maybe a delayed. Maybe it's not 2021, maybe it will be 2022, and maybe it's dependent on us having found a vaccine and treatments that worked. One of the things for the games too is that for the athletes to take part in it, they have to pre-qualify for it. And the pre-qualification would take place in most of this year, which is also going to be an issue likely that they have never faced in beforehand. So it will be interesting. We have to see what is happening, and we have our eyes on this particular one. But while we're talking about municipal facilities, ones that accommodate sports and others, we're looking at if people are open to go out again, will the way you look at your city or your town change? Will you look at sidewalks differently down the road, saying like we have to look at them differently? They have to be wider than what we have right now. Do we need to accommodate different things that you have maybe previously not considered when planning your city, that you're now saying we do need to take them into consideration? This is the new reality. It's not just a short-term reality that we're in. This is actually something that we need to be prepared for in the long run. Mayor Easton, when you look at the town of Lincoln, you look at gathering places, you look at sidewalks, you look at roads, do you think things have to change? Or do we just have to say that people's behavior has to change?
Well, we would be very remiss if we didn't take advantage of this as an opportunity to properly plan our communities. And if we were ever looking for an imperative to do that, we certainly have it now. In the last 2 to 3 years, the town of Lincoln has invested in a large number of master plans to help us do this. And you're well aware of our transportation master plan, and particularly the one around recreation, parks, etc. And in each of those documents, they speak to all of the issues that you're talking about. And so I would say that we were already on the road to doing the right thing. And changing the way our communities looked and how the community interacts. And really, we now have the imperative to do that. There is no reason now for us to be holding back. We need to use every bit of expert advice and information, the engagement that we have with our communities. We need to use all of this information now to make all the best decisions for our communities.
I'm slightly, thank you very much, Mayor Easton. Mayor Campion, if you're all right, if I can give you a different question. I'm only conscious of the time that we have. And this one, I think, is an interesting one that has come forward. Both the federal and provincial levels have made decisions at unprecedented speed, bold ones to support individuals and businesses in an effort to minimize the economic impact on people and communities. It is and has been encouraging to see. We are recognizing how interconnected we are, that there is a level of economic solidarity as we're moving forward. And at a local level, where we are faced and businesses are faced with a two-tiered system, when businesses are able to sustainably resume their operations, how can municipalities support? And in this particular case, it's looking at, do we have opportunities to harmonize permits and fees across Niagara? Do we have opportunities reducing red tape to allow business to more quickly resume their economic function and their organizational functions? Things that maybe in the past you have heard from business, we have heard from businesses that would take months to actually move through levels of government, local levels of government. Is there something that can be done in merely days? Do you see opportunities here in supporting businesses? Mayor Campion?
Yes, that's a big question that could have a very, very large answer, but I'll be fairly concise. There are many things that municipalities can do to reduce red tape. And I think the two things that you really touched on are what can municipalities do, and then how can you, in a two-tier system, I'm hearing that loud and clear, in a two-tier system, how do you make things happen faster? So I'll go to that part first. I believe that as opposed to centralizing permits, planning stuff, it would be, I think, more prudent and more effective to have a delegated authority. So if we're looking at trying to make things work smoother, I would prefer to say, let the municipalities handle planning and have whatever the region does, delegate that to us. But we're all our planners are all planners. They follow the same act. We know what our official plans are, et cetera. So I think there's a bit of a redundancy there, and wherever it's not redundant, there's an overlap that slows things down. And so I think we need to eliminate that. We are very good, nimble, quick down here in Welland. We can process things extraordinarily quickly and get building permits out fast. We can get building permits out in 4 to 8 weeks on very, very, very large projects. So, and we have a reputation for that. If there's a slowdown, it's because it has to go through other processes. And so if we can delegate that locally, that's better. As far as, working with other municipalities, we do have MOUs with a few municipalities around, so we try to work together on certain types of projects, more on purchasing and things like that. And then from a very specific local level, and I guess it could go regional and probably provincial at the same time. But one of the things we're going to see is that they're going to allow only so many people to work at a certain place. So if we're talking about a large construction project, they're going to restrict the number of people that can be on site at one time. And so if we've got, welders in, and then we need electricians in, there may be a problem there. And so they may have to extend the length of time that they're on the site during the day, which would mean they're going to be working earlier in the morning and later at night. And it may be an inconvenience, but we may have to adjust our local bylaws to allow, particularly in the noise sector and transportation, we may have to take a small hit where the community might have to put up with a little bit more noise earlier and later in the day in order to ramp these projects up and getting them moving faster. So those are just a couple of comments, but I mean, there are many, many things I think that can be done.
Yeah, we look at it too, and we think that there are many opportunities. Thank you very much, Mayor Campion. Mayor Easton, are there any opportunities to support businesses to get out of the gates quicker and not be held back by our redundance in some areas, red tape, our two-tier system that sometimes has been difficult for business to deal with?
Of course, it's interesting that Mayor Campion and I would be here together because both of our communities have very good reputations. And this isn't a self-evaluation. This is an evaluation by industry and the people that come in to do business with the town. It's an attitude. You either are going to provide excellent service and you're going to put things in place to provide that quality service, or you're not. And so sometimes you need technology to help you with that. Sometimes it is the delegation of authority. I think that's an extremely important point. That is really, a higher order behavior that many people are so nervous of, and yet there are many checks and balances that you can put in place that council would control. So I'm not concerned so much about the two-tiered part because delays can exist everywhere. But right now, businesses are frustrated in many cases. There's a lot of fear, which is very understandable. So the smooth operation at the town level is extremely important. People are looking for a helping hand. They're looking for a listening ear. Sometimes they're looking for a cheerleader. Sometimes they're looking for help with their own technology. And whatever it is, we are here to help them. And that is, I think, the best way to go forward. But if we need to change our internal operations in order to make that operate more smoothly and with less red tape, we're obliged to do that. Because our biggest obligation, Mishka, is to leave our communities better than we found them. And what could be more important than in the midst of a pandemic?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And it's good to hear from both of you the commitment that you're making to the business community to be as efficient as you can be to support their success, because you're right, the business community is in shock and they are afraid. That is really something that is present, that is there, and any support that they can get that assists them in moving their operation forward is so greatly appreciated. We have time enough for about a minute of closing comments from each one of you, but I was wondering if I can guide your closing comments in a certain direction. So forgive me for not having said that ahead of time, but looking forward beyond the next weeks, the next months, potentially years, what will be the lasting marks that this pandemic had on Welland or on the town of Lincoln's economy? So if you imagine looking back and saying, what is the lasting mark that you think this pandemic had on your community? And Mayor Easton, if I can ask you maybe to, in your closing comments, to address this one as well.
Well, I'm going to manipulate your question and the direction of your answer, but I would say that our ability to maintain and to be true to our core services is what is going to be very important. Because if we are not able to maintain a really healthy horticulture, agricultural community, small manufacturing. This is really what is the steam behind everything that we do. If we can't maintain that, then we will fail. But I don't believe for a moment that we're going to, but that is certainly where we need to put our emphasis. We have to be sticking to our core services. But I also want to say that in all communities, not just Lincoln, the whole issue around public health and where we are going to be going in the future in terms of the determinants of health and being able to identify those for each of our communities and ensure that the services are there to support them. If we do not do this, then we will have completely failed, not only our economy, but everything in terms of people's health and well-being. And I cannot say that enough. We, I think, have taken public health for granted for a long, long time. And you know, I know one of the areas that people look at is creating mega institutions, and they are very important. We need to define our secondary and tertiary care services, but mostly we need to be absolutely sure where we are going with primary care and where people are going to be cared for in the community, how that care is going to be organized, what we can expect. And so it doesn't, you don't have to go very far to establish what's important to people, and that's their good health. And if we haven't established that, if we don't understand that now, Mishka, we're never going to understand it.
Yeah, I think this is something that the pandemic has taught us more than anything, is that that has to, under all circumstances, always be our #1 priority for every single resident of every community across Niagara and across the country. I fully agree. Mayor Campion, closing comments?
Well, I'd just like to echo what Mayor Easton said. I agree wholeheartedly on the health side. You know, I think if we're looking back, you know, 5 years from now, we're looking back, what I would hope to see is that, which I expect we will see, we're going to rebound very, very quickly in Welland and across Niagara. I think we're poised. The market is, the downturn certainly in the market is all man-made. So we had a very good economy going, and then essentially the brakes were put on it. So it was sort of a natural cause to this, which will have some lasting implications. But what I want to look at is, you know, we've been through SARS and H1N1. We've had several kind of pandemics and those types of things in the past. And it appears to me that we went through it, we survived them, but we didn't appear to learn very much from them. And I'm hoping that, you know, number 3 here that I can recall, this actually is a learning experience for everybody. So we can see this can happen. We can see the devastation it can create. And so we need to be, 5 years down the road, I would like to be able to say, you know what, we set the standard, we learned something, here's how we're going to move forward with business, here's how we're going to move forward with our community development, and here's how we're going to make sure that we're prepared for it if it ever happens again, and essentially have an overlay that says, when this happens, we push a button and all of this stuff happens overnight. We shut down a park, we do this, whatever we need to do happens immediately. And so it's a very short-term remedy to a very large problem. So my biggest thing is let's learn something from this and make sure that we're prepared.
I hope so too. I hope that actually this crisis is that we are learning something out of it, that we also are being changed by it. I think that this is actually something that can be extremely beneficial. But one of the things that I'm really wanted to thank both of you for is that your commitment to actually leaving your community better than you inherited it, and that you're looking back and saying, in 5 years from now, I want to see Welland, I want to see Lincoln, I want to see Niagara better than what it is doing right now, and better prepared for what maybe the future will bring too. We will, both Mayor Easton and Mayor Campion, thank you so very much for being with us this morning. We will go back to work in schools, and we'll gather in restaurants and theaters again, and we will at sporting events and other things. But when we do, our municipalities and our leaders will not simply return to business as usual. And this is really something that came out of this morning's dialogue, and it was so good to hear that you're not planning to do it. Today's webinar has been recorded and will be available on our website at GNCC.ca, and will be emailed to all webinar participants directly. We spoke of a few resources. Sometimes we mention resources and subsidies. If you want a complete list of everything that is available to businesses and individuals, please check out our website. And if you have any questions about it, never hesitate reaching out to us directly. We can be reached at info@gncc.ca, and we'd love to help answer any questions that you have. Our next webinar is on Thursday, and this one is with 2 strategists with TD Securities to look at the economic impact of COVID-19 on Canada, on individuals' personal debt, the effects on the housing market, household income, and more. I hope you can join us. And lastly, to all attendees, thank you for being with us today. Please stay in touch, and above all, stay healthy. Thank you.